In the air.
Okay.
All right. So where did we leave it in our discussion?
Well, I guess we're trying to determine whether in fact it makes sense to extend retail use into the commercial highway district. And whether we should look at different buffers for distances. Retail versus some of the other uses,
Well, Martha,
residential.
by your calculations, if we were to also allow it in the commercial highway district with the buffers that we're considering right now, is there any place in the CH district it would be allowed?
And these are the two commercial buildings that are there right now. There's Pearson Plaza and there's the Apple Building. That could not be done if you were to go back into some of these other lots, which are currently used as residential, but zoned commercial highway, like say behind Pearson Plaza, back here. It could be done.
So it's zoned for it.
It's zoned for
So
it,
you have to build a structure for it.
right,
So it could happen.
it could happen,
So it's not completely limiting.
right.
Okay.
Then I think that's fine. It's a good compromise.
Yep.
Rachel?
Well, what is the buffer we're talking about now there? Is it still 300 feet?
We're at 300 feet,
Okay.
building to building, and there is a way to make it work in the commercial highway district in the area of concern with an adjacent lot that is also zoned for commercial.
Okay.
But that currently has a residence on it.
Currently has a
Currently
residence,
residence.
right.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is, and I think we talked about this last time, that Pearson Plaza and where we are right now are both fairly ideal locations for this kind of a use, despite the fact that we're dealing with this buffer problem. I actually think the uses that are currently on both of those sites could be equally concerning to a residence if you were a neighbor of them. And I don't see this particular use as more concerning as a neighbor, personally. That's my position, but I sort of, if we want to encourage this kind of a use, this kind of a business, and we're saying, well, your only real option is this residential lot, you'd have to make an offer to, whatever. That,
Right,
it's a
right.
hypothetical that's
Right,
not,
right.
it doesn't have a lot of basis in current reality. I think it would be a shame to lose these two sites as an attractive location for a business like this. My kids' bus stop stopped at Pearson Plaza. There's a lot going on there that's already would be concern if my home was next door to it, frankly. And I don't necessarily feel as though I think any business of this type will get a lot of safety precautions and, attention, and there'll be on more oversight and more attention to it than
What is currently?
the rusty hand, whatever, what's it called? Rusty
Nail.
can?
Rusty
nail.
can, sorry.
Okay.
It's,
Well, I mean,
I think it would be a shame to make a decision that eliminates those two lots.
So that brings us down to a buffer of 150 feet then,
or no buffer.
or no buffer. I don't know if the town would be comfortable with no buffer.
That's the concern.
That's a concern.
Yeah, that's the concern.
So, with your understanding, I'm back to the half a football field buffer.
It depends what the town wants at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're trying to just get something to the selectmen, so it's what we feel comfortable with, I think, about the buffer.
Right.
So, Rachel, would you like to ask for folks to weigh in on the position of 150 versus 300?
Didn't you just do that?
Can I have one one question, this phrase about excluding the northwestern junction of the right-of-way, what does that refer to?
So that's actually where the AL Prime gas station is,
Okay,
and,
and why is that?
well, first of all, it couldn't be done because it's too close to a residence.
Okay,
And that lot, I think, is still, don't think we've changed, I have to double check on that actually. I'm not sure that we've changed the zoning. It's sort of commercial towards the front and residential towards the back. I actually have to check on that, but it just didn't seem to be a good location. Because
I
the
guess
residence
if
is
it's-
right there, it's right next to it.
yeah.
It's about 50, it's 50 feet or something like that, so.
I guess my observation would be if you have language in here that's excluding one lot, it sort of opens the door to someone suggesting, well, why don't you, can I amend this article to exclude the lot next to my house or something? But if the buffer zone eliminates it anyway, maybe we don't need that.
It does, I mean, from that point of view, maybe it could just.
Does 150 eliminate it, or just 300?
No, 150 eliminates it.
Because there's a house on the lot.
There's a house, yeah, there's a house on the lot right next to it.
Okay. Well, maybe that will make it cleaner.
Yeah, just do the entire commercial highway
Yes.
district. Okay, and that also includes the end of Scotland Road, right near the interchange where the police barracks is right
Okay.
now.
Right next to the state police barracks.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Perfect.
good.
That's a good
Good
site.
spot.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Well, if it's 150, as a practical matter, I'd be voting against it. I think 300 feet is good.
All right. Well, I guess we're into polling. George would prefer 300. Larry?
Is there a compromise position with 200 work?
Not for Pearson Plaza, based on my map measurements.
I take Kristen's point about preserving that as a potential site. I would go with the 150.
Okay. Rachel?
Well, if the 300 is really, in practical terms, going to make the commercial highway really not viable, I mean, who are we kidding here? So, I mean, that's what we have to figure out. I'm fine with 150. Quite frankly, I'm fine with no buffer, but I don't think we can sell it. So, you know, putting the 300 back up there, I think maybe we should just drop the commercial highway. At least what it sounds
There's
to
only
me.
one
I don't
vote
have
so
your
far
maps in
against
front of me,
150.
I don't have the maps right in front of me to do it, but.
So I guess what you're saying, Rachel, is either we go with the 150 or we drop the commercial highway and just go with the 300 in the light, what is it?
Business,
BLI?
industrial BLI, right. And that would be dropping the commercial highway for all marijuana establishments and limiting to the BLI.
Well, I'm the only one in favor
Which
of
is the one?
300, so it's going to be a vote.
All right, so we're at a crossroads. So yes, I'm going to ask for people's opinion on 150 versus 300. Rachel, where are you?
I am for 150
Okay.
versus 300.
Kristen, I'm just going to ask for your opinion.
I'm for 150.
Okay. Larry's for 150.
Ditto.
George?
300.
All right, I'm still giving you your ride home.
That's right.
But is he going to accept it?
I also move that George present this to town meeting.
I would
I don't
support.
think you want me to.
I would support 150 as well. So maybe we'll just modify that language, which will then allow us to continue with what we have currently.
And do we want to include the entire CH district?
And include the entire CH. It is cleaner that way.
Yeah, it is.
That's not, it won't be consistent with our medical marijuana, but I think that's okay. My guess is that we're gonna have to redo that at some point anyway, because,
We didn't have this consideration. Yeah, okay.
right. So just to make sure that I'm clear, so we will have the 500 foot.
School.
Yeah, so we're gonna allow retail in both BLI and CH. We will have a 500-foot buffer from schools and daycares
Yes.
and property line to property line. and then 150 feet structure to structure
Yes.
for residential.
Everyone understands that?
Yep.
Do you need a motion for this, too?
I mean, if you want to.
Okay.
Is there any other amendment that you want to make
The language?
to the language?
Comfortable?
Nothing.
George, do you want to make a motion?
No.
So I think the motion would be to recommend this language to the selectmen as amended.
Also move.
Sorry? Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have to do a roll call.
Roll call,
that's
right.
right.
Rachel, roll call?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
George?
No.
Peter? Yes. Okay, beautiful. Because Kristen can't vote, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kristen. Opinion valuable.
Yeah, don't comment.
Okay. Moving on to our second,
Could I just ask one question about, is this plaza eligible to be in?
Yeah, and actually, that's what we were talking about. So this is a commercial highway A, so just to clarify that that's part of the motion. So we're adding to commercial, all of commercial highway plus commercial highway
okay.
Okay.
Is that-
We're going to move into our wireless. Rachel, do you want to present the wireless communication?
Sure. Just let me get it up here. For the most part, it's probably easier to explain that wherever we had 900 feet for whatever, for distance from property lines, from distance for notification of the butters, for any other things. We changed it from 900 feet to 300 feet. And then, aside from that, all the way down to, all the way down to sections 7, wherever it is. Oh, I guess the
Compliance and violations?
so compliance and violations was one of them, and now so I'm looking at a different, I guess I'm looking at a different markup here, so bear with me. Okay, I found it. Yeah. Under compliance and violations, which is section 6D, we added some language that just says unless the applicant has received approval for modification to a previously approved facility under the next section, which is going to be a modification, then they still have to apply, they still have to comply, I should say, with the special permit and whatever it is was approved initially. So they don't, nothing changes unless and until they apply for modification and get approved under this new section, which is 7, modification to eligible facilities request, which is defined by federal law. So that whole section has been deleted essentially and replaced with the federal requirements and simplifying it by having the building commissioner be the reviewing and approval entity. Was that clear as mud?
Clear as mud?
Yeah.
Yes, clear as mud.
Yes,
That was-
okay.
I thought that was fine, Rachel, I understood you.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Plus, it's right here in front of us, so.
I mean, essentially, we were just trying to update that section so we're in compliance with federal law for modifications.
Okay.
And then I had a couple questions going through it. We actually do, in our zoning, currently have an inconsistency about where the wireless communications towers are allowed. In our chapter regarding use districts and locations where these can be placed, it limits it to the business and light industrial district. The language in here under 2A, actually, originally we had an industrial district and a commercial highway district. Along Route 1, those were combined into the business and light industrial district a number of years ago. So right now, the way this reads is industrial and commercial highway districts, which would be Scotland Road, Pearson Plaza, as well as the business and light industrial district. Our zoning map shows it only in the business and light industrial district. So I think this might be an opportunity to at least make the language consistent one way or the other.
Right.
And whether you,
I mean, is there a problem with also including the commercial highway district here? Would that be a bad move?
I mean, there's some existing already. There are some on, Scotland Road at Salter. Martha, do you remember when we were first talking about it, what was the intention? Was it to be just along Route 1, or was it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we thought, and I think we talked about it last time too, is there one in the Byfield water tower?
Yes.
There is.
I don't know
okay.
whether it's operating,
Okay,
but there are antennas up there.
okay. And then the state police barracks must have put that one in. Was it already in there when we wrote the bylaw?
I don't know, and I don't know if the one at Salter was in either.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So in that case, they would be grandfathered.
I think they would be.
Yeah, so,
But there was no, residential building there at the time, I don't think.
right. So the intention really was to just have it in what was then the industrial and the
Right.
commercial highway district along Route 1.
Yeah.
So that would then mean this change here, I just changed it to business and light industrial district, that would be consistent with what language we have elsewhere as well as with the zoning map. If that's all right with you guys.
There are some differences in technology showing up. Verizon offered to put a CAN antenna down in Plum Island. And what do we think about that? Should we revise to include those?
Well, I guess the question is, if that goes back to the whole discussion we've had about 5G technology, I mean, the intention here, I think, is to kind of update the bylaw to make it compliant with federal law, which we haven't done yet, with the anticipation that there would probably be another round of revisions in the future.
When 5G technology is more rolled out.
Right, right. And Rachel, is that kind of consistent with what your thinking was?
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly it. We're not in a position to rewrite this whole thing now to comply with 5G because we don't know what they're going to ask for. But it's going to be a much denser network, which means that whatever equipment that they eventually are going to need, it's going to be more likely to be on telephone poles. It doesn't mean the towers will go away, but there's going to be a much denser network of equipment. So it's going to require a whole new, different bylaw here, essentially, which I'm not ready to write.
Okay.
So, yes, the intention here was just to update, just to get us somewhat compliant with the federal laws for modifications of existing structures, facilities. And if we, and to make, of course, as Martha points out, to try to make our language consistent in all the places that it appears.
Okay. Very well.
Yep, that's perfect then. Would someone like to make a motion to accept these recommendations?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? We will have to do a roll call. Rachel?
Yes,
Larry?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Peter? Yes. Kristen?
Sounds good.
All right.
I support you.
Excellent. Beautiful.
perfect.
Beautiful. All righty. Going into our special permits granting authority. Martha, do you want to talk on this?
Yes, and this is, we went over this before, and there's no change in language here. This was just to clear up, it was kind of a bylaw appendix from the point when the selectmen were the only special permit granting authority for uses in the residential agricultural district. When we created the table of use regulations, we actually designated the planning board as the special permit granting authority for a number of uses. Selectmen are for some, and the ZBA is for two, I think, actually three. So this is just to add the planning board and the zoning board to this language to recognize them as special permit granting authorities.
So basically, it's just housekeeping.
It's housekeeping, yeah. It was a much quicker way of saying it.
All right. Any other questions on housekeeping?
I just have a question on that. Who determines which one is the granting authority?
That's in the table of use regulations, and that's been spelled out.
Thanks.
You know, whether that should be looked at some point to determine if there should be changes that, you know.
Yeah, so an applicant would have no position to have that be subjective in some way. It's laid out
Right,
in the
it's all- yeah,
regulations
and
and
it's all-
everybody knows. Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's all laid out here, so if it says SPS, that's Board of Selectmen, if it's SP, it's Planning Board, if it's
Yeah.
SPA, it's Zoning Board of Appeals, and that's it.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. I accept a motion to accept the housekeeping.
So moved.
All righty. All righty. All those in favor will do a roll call.
Rachel?
Yes,
All right. Sure.
Larry, yes.
Larry,
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Pete, yes, and Kristen on the board. Okay, I think we're good to go.
Did you vote?
I said yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, and our other component here is, I think, recommendations from our building inspector regarding temporary trailers.
Yes, for zoning, and then he's got some general bylaw ones. This language was tweaked slightly. The purpose of this really is to address an issue which has come up a few times, most recently with the property on Orchard Street where there was an existing house which is no longer being used as a residence. The builder is building a new residence farther back on the lot and wanted to know whether he could use the existing house as his construction trailer. Currently, there's nothing in our bylaw that really allows Sam to permit that. If the structure were still being used as a residence, it could stay, because he would have control over that occupancy permit. So once the other dwelling was occupied, the permit for this one would be basically revoked, and the structure would be pulled down. So, you know, his feeling is that to actually have to take down a perfectly good building, which could serve as a construction trailer during a construction process, and bring in a construction trailer and a porta potty is kind of an unfortunate thing to do, so he's just trying to address that through this change.
I agree.
Okay.
All right. Any questions or discussions on this?
no,
That
that's all good.
that makes sense. Why would they, I mean, couldn't they use it without getting special permission from the building inspector? Or is it an issue?
You know, the way it's, I guess it's not clear, so he,
Yeah,
you know, he just doesn't feel that he can do it. If it's continuing to be used as a residence, that's fine. And
yeah,
somebody could use it as a residence and have a construction trailer in, or have a construction office there, but
yeah,
once that residential use has ceased,
yeah,
he just doesn't see a clear way to allow that structure to remain there, because we
Yeah.
don't allow two principal structures on one lot.
How large is the original house compared to the new one being built?
I mean, I guess it would depend. This one was pretty small, relatively. But I think it's really not a matter of size, it's more a matter of use.
Right, and as soon as the new house is lived in, or being used as a residential use, then that original house must be demolished.
Right, so the last, I guess paragraph 4 here, it says, the contractor would furnish the building commissioner with a notarized letter stating that the building would come down or the occupancy would be terminated when receipt of the certificate of occupancy for the other building, and that the existing dwelling would be taken down within 30 days.
Mhm.
That was the one change from the language that you saw before. He had 15 days. So this gives him a level of comfort that he could actually allow this to happen.
Yeah, I agree with whatever Sam recommends on this.
And since we're talking about Sam's wheelhouse here, do we want to talk about the other little provisions?
What I'd suggest is that the board, since this is a zoning bylaw change, the board can take a vote on
Okay,
that
okay.
to recommend. And then the other are general bylaws, and they're not, he's run it by us, but
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to accept the revision to the zoning bylaws regarding temporary trailers.
And so move.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, roll call. Rachel?
Yes,
Larry, yes?
Yes.
Peter, yes, and Kristen? In support. All right. I think then that's good.
So then, the general bylaw revisions that he's suggesting, the first one is to add some provisions in chapter 56 of our code of the town of Newbury regarding roosters, based on a number of complaints that he has received. We reviewed that previously, and one of the questions came, was he had said with the exception of registered farms. And so we've changed that to read except on premises which qualify as farms under Mass General Law, Chapter 128, Section 1A, and Chapter 48, Section 3. That's definitely language I'd want to run by town council. And again, these aren't zoning bylaws, so they don't go through the public hearing process, but definitely she needs to weigh in on the language. And then anybody violating that would be fined $50 a day for each offense, with each rooster and each day constituting a separate offense.
With each rooster?
Mhm.
Or what about the fellow who sells eggs and so on down near Pearson Plaza? Will that affect him? 'Cause I'm sure there's a restaurant there someplace.
One or two?
Well, it's a good question. If he qualifies as a farm, if he's,
As defined as farm under MGL, Chapter 128.
right, 128, Section A, and in Chapter 48, Section 3 really puts size limitations of 5 acres or 2 acres.
And it says and, not or.
Right.
That's different. That's a different intention.
Yeah, it was really that it would be both. So again, I'd really like to run this by council.
Yeah, he's been running that for years.
Right.
I think you're probably, looking back at this map, you're probably talking about this parcel right here anyway. Rachel, I guess you don't have this R19-0-19. Just eyeballing it, it looks like it might be 5 acres anyway. But it'd be grandfathered.
Yeah, I think you're right on the size. I could double check that. But,
Yeah, you might be okay anyway.
yeah. And the concern really is for people who are kind of hobbyists,
Yeah.
who don't have a legitimate agricultural use for them, and they are
It's a
nuisances.
huge lot.
Yeah, it is. I mean, once again, just eyeballing it,
Oh, they chase you down your own driveway, pecking at your legs. All right, so that's roosters.
Something.
We want to also talk about earth moving.
And the earth moving one, actually sort of came from what's happening at 34 Newman Road right now, where there's been, a fair amount of earth removal cutting into Old Town Hill. And right now, there's nothing for a situation where earth is being removed for construction of a building. There's nothing that really regulates that, so Sam's suggestion was to at least set a limit, so anything over the 20,000 cubic yards would fall under the regulations of this chapter.
Did we ever get an eyeball or an idea of how much 20,000 cubic yards is? I have trouble knowing how much earth that is.
We talked about that before, and it's hard to determine. Was the number of and weight of the trucks being counted?
Well, I think it's really, it's volume of the earth, so.
I mean, was this Sam's number?
That was Sam's number.
Yeah, okay. I'm assuming he knows how much 20,000 cubic yards is.
Yeah, and he was sort of thinking about, foundations and
Right, excavation for a foundation,
excavation
for a
for
typical
foundation.
foundation, right?
Right.
I think that's where that number came from, Rachel.
Okay. I mean, he's the one concerned about it, so, this is his number, that's fine with me.
I can double check with him.
It just sounds like a lot, so I don't know. Maybe it's not, that much. Maybe that's what comes out of the typical foundation, but it sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it's a fair, oops, sorry. I'm just trying to do a quick calculation.
What is the regulation saying? Is it limiting what can be removed, or?
Yes,
I don't have the whole thing in front of me,
No,
just can't say.
just in order to think of, I just don't know the bylaw, in order to think about what we're trying to,
well, I
what
think,
the concern is.
I
Too
think-
much?
I think what this is saying is, if I understand your question, as I'm interpreting this, it's saying that the removal of sand, gravel, et cetera, is subject to these regulations unless it's incidental to and in connection with the construction of a building or a parcel, in which case, you own anything over 20,000 cubic yards. How's that for triple negatives?
Yeah.
Would be subject.
huh?
Yeah, would be subject.
Yeah, so in other words, I think what they're saying is, what he's trying to say is, what he is saying here is, you can remove up to 20,000 cubic yards in connection with this construction without being subject to the regulations. Was that your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I don't know
What the regulations, yeah, they're in.
right, like how, what are the regulations trying to control? Like how it's removed, or where it's removed, or?
The quantity, I think.
Well, so the regulations regard removal and processing operations shall not be conducted closer than 50 feet to a public street. All equipment, talks about equipment, off-street parking, access to excavated areas, work face or bank that slopes more than 30 degrees downward adjacent to a public street will be adequately fenced at the top. So that probably is pertinent here. Adequate provision is to be made for drainage during and after completion of operations. Lateral support shall be maintained for adjacent properties. Use of explosives, compliance with laws. So right now, any excavation related to building construction is not subject to these regulations. So he's trying to
So erosion issues, runoff issues, safety issues.
right.
So
When
also-
you're building a house and you are excavating, they're not subject to,
Right now.
incidental is the word that's kind of relevant.
I don't know this, but I suspect one of his concerns is abuse under the current
landscape.
wording. That someone goes in, they're putting in a foundation, so they remove hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of material and sell it off-site,
Right.
which happens.
And if you're cutting in, cutting substantially into a hill without any control for, what's lateral load or anything else.
Yeah, so back to Rachel's question, I think it is interesting to imagine what that is, because you might think removing any amount of material, if you're on a very steep slope, or if you're on a certain distance from the road, I mean, any kind of removal of sand and gravel in certain site conditions might be worthy of some kind of oversight by the building inspector.
I think that's,
It's not a
again,
different issue.
that's, my guess is that that's where you come up with the 20,000 cubic yards figure, that anything over that is gonna be
Concern.
an area of concern,
Right.
you know?
All right, do we want to touch on peace and good order?
So Peace and Good Order again comes back to complaints that he has received for work being done by contractors in very early morning hours, late hours, and certain holidays. He said Thanksgiving actually is the worst. Christmas and New Year's Day, contractors tend to take off, but Thanksgiving is the one when he gets the most complaints. And the question that I had was, what about noise not associated with a valid building permit, such as a homeowner doing late night, early morning hammering? His reply was, for any activities not relating to a valid building permit, it would be subject to Mass General Law for noise and disturbing the peace that we have now. This will get the majority of the complaints relating to construction. And it's been kind of an ongoing issue, and we talked about it during site plan review, trying to limit hours of construction to minimize nuisance noise
To neighbors and
to neighbors and butters.
Any questions or discussion on this? Seeing none, I guess I'd entertain a motion to accept the recommendations regarding the proposed general bylaw revisions.
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call, all in favor? Rachel?
Yes,
Larry?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Peter? Yes. Kristen? In support. We're there.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to revisions of chapter 56.
That was it.
Oh, that's it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, those were
Oh,
all
yeah,
those.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've already talked schedule, so we'll stick with the original schedule. And I guess the other question is there anything else we had talked about solar? We had talked about some other things. Is there anything else that we want to put forward?
Solar, I
for the
think
spring?
we're going to defer, yeah, we're going to defer on that for a little bit.
Okay.
Do we talk about the changes on this?
That goes up the marijuana
Oh.
thing, so that will actually need to be revised based on what we talked about tonight.
Okay.
So we'll add the commercial highway A as a special permit. Special permit use for marijuana.
All right. Are you ready for your town planners report?
I guess so. Let's see, so I've got a few things here. Tony Kamornick at MVPC has been working on a Byfield Village parking study. This was requested by Tracy. A while back, he's given me a final draft, which I reviewed and gave him some comments back. There'll be a final done, and as soon as it's ready, I'll be presenting it to all of you. But he's made some interesting observations about parking in Byfield Village and the randomness of it. For any given event, if it takes place 2 nights in a row, the parking will be completely different. And he's made some recommendations on how to potentially acquire some additional parking. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's coming.
Just interestingly, my colleague just spoke at a panel that Greenbelt was holding in the yellow building, and it was that night that it was pouring rain a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago or so. And she said, and then it was dark at 6 o'clock, it was from 6 to 8. She said the parking was like, she's never, like, people were driving across people's lawns, people were getting stuck in the mud, just right around the.
That's very common.
Yeah.
Really is.
It's part of the local
I was
charm.
not, I know, I've never experienced that. She was very funny describing that it was kind of like the Wild West
That's
of
funny.
parking.
I'll pass that on to Tony. I mean, he was just shocked at how it changed every time he was there.
That's interesting.
There was no, no set pattern. Sometimes people park parallel, sometimes they park head in.
Mm.
Election day, too. It's another adventure.
Mm.
Right.
So, let's see, and then we have a couple of three approval not required plans that are gonna be coming our way. One is for Bill DiFrancesco, who wants, I think I might have mentioned this last time, carve a lot out of his lot with frontage on Boston Road. There's one down sort of off of Tennis Court. It's not really because it doesn't have frontage, so we've been working with town council on that one. I think we've gotten a revision which may be coming our way. And then
Where's tennis court?
Tennis Court is, where Hanover Street is.
Yeah.
And where it intersects with Route 1. If you go just south, it's the first street on the right. It's a
Okay,
little
okay.
dead end
Got it.
that goes down in there. And we've also just gotten a draft A&R plan for 43 Orchard Street. That parcel is in Chapter 61A, so we're trying to sort out if this will actually impact its status. So those are the three that are coming sometime
Okay.
soon. We do have the 2 public hearings scheduled for February 20th. I'm going to be following up with Charing Cross tomorrow. I have not received anything from them at all. So I'll be following up with them to get materials by next Wednesday to send to you all. And then the other one is the Upper Green. So right now, they're currently scheduled 5 minutes apart, so we'll just have to recognize the second one.
Now, the Evergreen is doing a presentation at the Brown School.
They are going to be having a public information session.
And they're meeting with the selectmen next Tuesday, I believe, aren't they? On the 12th?
I think that's actually the decision to, on whether or not to accept the gift is going to be deferred until after they've had their public
Okay.
information session. And we may be getting some revised plans. But they may be revised further after the public information session, so.
Is there a date for that?
Not yet, it's gonna be either probably the last week in February or first week in March.
So then the selectmen won't be making a decision on whether or not how to accept the gift until after our public hearing then.
Right, right.
Angelo. Should we be doing something with him concerning the work that was supposed to be done up near the tower for drainage,
Yeah, that's a good question.
general site condition?
Let me follow up with Doug on that.
That would be good.
What is that project?
That's the, I'll call it the office building now, it's on Route 1 near the storage facility.
It's where Angie's Service Center is and
Yeah.
Post Fly. It was originally all gonna be headquarters for ERA construction. And there have been some sort of ongoing issues with the site and how it's being managed and materials that are on it towards the back.
Hmm.
us know what Doug has to say,
I will.
invite him in.
Yeah, it might be.
Can I ask one question about the upper green, just back 30 seconds, sorry. Just, I just saw the notice about the public meeting, but I'm just wondering how, it looks like they're looking for input on the project.
They are.
How does that reflect what the planning board is doing on our site plan review?
I think that, you know, whatever changes they make, I mean, we've only just started it, so the board will end up reviewing whatever changes are being made, and assuming that they're gonna do some work with Historic New England and changes come out of that, it's gonna be a process, I think, for.
So I'm just wondering about meeting on February 20th, if there's a meeting a week later with public input that might be resulting in changes.
I think what they may wanna do is just, talk about what they've
Get
heard so
our
far
input.
and how they're potentially responding to that,
Mhm.
and then present that information with the understanding that it will be further refined.
Have they committed to working with Historic New England?
They have apparently reached out to them,
Good.
so.
We're-
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else, Martha?
Not from me.
All right. Shall we go into liaison reports?
Sure.
For the
Yeah.
Board of
Do
Selectmen
you all
meeting?
have time for my 2 cents?
Sure.
Sure.
This is on
I hope
regarding,
it's relevant to the items you've been talking about.
okay. Sure, come on up and identify yourself.
I'm Ann Quill from Great Meadow Road. You can tell me if it goes someplace else or not, but you were talking about the removal of land. Specifically, I wanted to talk about soil removal. And a little straight, of course, with my own story. We bought our land directly in 1992 and hired a contractor. And of course, we were both working, and worse than that, I was traveling all week. Well, he noticed the lovely deep soil that had been farmed for 200 years. And in our absence, he decided he was going to take all that extra soil and bring it over to his building project in Georgetown. I didn't know that we had, at the time, a law here about doing those things. But it was even written in my agreement when we bought the land, we wouldn't do that. And we didn't want to because my husband had a nice little patch of cornfield and everything, he had won prizes, we were looking forward to this. So one day I was home when I shouldn't have been, and I caught him. That's how I found out that he was using it. I was told by a real estate attorney that there was no legal precedent for me to pursue him. I mean, I could try, but there was no legal precedent, so it was gonna be difficult. Because of course builders routinely, when they own the land, take the extra footprint of the house and do what they want with it. In our case, there was plenty of places that soil could have gone from the footprint of the house. So I was thinking that when a builder has to build a house, it actually be part of the building permit that this is the law or the bylaws in Newbury. And $100 fine for violating that doesn't touch it. I mean, the loam he took away, just one truckload was worth way, way more than $100, and he would have gladly swapped the loam he got from our large lot. So since you're doing housekeeping on some of these, this would be in what, 60-3 or? There should be no way that a builder can do what he wants and not ask and hope it's okay.
Has to be caught.
Yeah,
That's the
I,
problem.
Yeah, but if it had been in the contract, that this was the lot, it doesn't say you've done anything, and you have to permit, it just says, just as the same as when you sell a piece of land.
Right.
Even if the land hasn't been sold, which we already owned, if the contractor, if the builder is actually gonna do it, it should be written right in the building permit. Same as it would be announced to a buyer. And the fine is way too low, in my humble opinion.
So Martha's looking right now at the bylaw.
So 60-3, which is. Yeah, I have to look at this. I mean, I think probably this is something that would really be, it's not a zoning bylaw, so the planning board doesn't really have any purview over it.
I wasn't sure, but when I saw it, you know.
Right, no.
The other stuff about, we care about farming in this town, and, well, it's in the section that talks about, there is a section that talks about,
Yes, removal of soil and loam.
right, as opposed to
Right.
gravel and
Right,
stuff in
right,
general.
Right. And I think it's something that I would have to look at it more closely to see how it fits in. Probably want to talk to the building commissioner to see
That's fine.
what he might recommend.
There is some reference to that in the subdivision control bylaw to prevent land stripping.
Right, right.
That
so
kind of
that- yeah,
development, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this proposed amendment, I think it goes towards the concern that you're raising, that any time you're removing the, excavation of over 20,000 cubic yards, that you have to, go through the,
Oh, I hope he didn't take 20,000 cubic yards of loam, but,
yeah, well, maybe it's not an exact parallel, but I hear what you're saying.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I absolutely hear what you're saying.
That would be a lot of loom.
Yeah.
It could be. But basically, you're not supposed to remove it, you're supposed to stockpile it on site and then reuse it.
Well, he stockpiled it over the winter, so told us he couldn't finish grading till the spring, but in the spring he took it to his construction site in Groveland.
Doesn't sound like that was appropriate.
No. And we've missed it ever since.
But it's a common occurrence, I think.
Yeah, it is, and the fact that there's no legal precedent was shocking to me, and that's why I thought, well, we could put something in our bylaws.
Well, that was 1992, though, you talked about.
Yeah.
Well, Martha will check with our building inspector, building commissioner, to see if there's something that we should maybe think about or investigate.
Does Martha have your name and address?
I do, I
Okay.
do.
Yep.
Just checking.
Martha knows me now.
Is there anything else that you want to discuss?
There is, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I know there's a section here that talks about discharging firearms, especially on private property without permission. Well, here goes another one of my stories. This spring, I had to go after two gentlemen. I live right over the marsh, near where this new house is being built. I had to go after two gentlemen who were out on the marsh with hunting bows. The marsh that I technically own. And were unconvinced that it wasn't public property and did not leave until I said, well, maybe you can explain to the police that it's public property. Because he did not certainly have my permission, but I think you might want to add hunting bows or traps or anything else along with firearms on private property.
Does private property have to be posted? That's for no trespassing.
You have to have written permission of the owner
Right.
to hunt.
It's kind of hard to post stuff out on the marsh.
Right, no,
Yeah.
understandable, yeah.
Yeah.
With the address located, identified.
I have it would be like 82.5 or 67.
I think it's 67-1.
Does that prohibit hunting without permission, or?
What it says is, chapter 67 is hunting. 67-1, consent required, no person shall fire or discharge any firearms on any private property except with the written consent of the owner or the legal occupant thereof. Such consent shall be carried at all times by any person hunting, but, you know, Anne's right, it's only referring to firearms, it's not referring to, like, hunting bows or trapping or anything like that, so.
It's a good point.
Good point.
Yeah, maybe it ought to just be hunting or trapping, period, without
Mention it.
reference to the method.
So that's something that perhaps I could discuss with town council to see what might be appropriate to do there.
And one more thing,
Sure.
I don't know where it fits exactly, maybe in 95 or maybe to another board. But we have a lot of protection of wetlands and things, laws, bylaws, especially for Plum Island. I live over the Parker River, and across the river from my house, you can see the other bank, and behind that is the Central Street playing field. Unfortunately, I left the picture in my car. But that bank is, it's high, and it is falling into the river. And I'm surprised it hasn't completely blocked the river yet. It's continuing to, it's all sand underneath and it's falling into the river. So, and I think my new neighbor may want a boat dock. And one of my other neighbors one year threatened he was gonna get his jet skis and have a great time on the lake. So I'm thinking maybe we need to protect these river banks. Maybe there needs to be some regulation about, especially in sensitive areas where it's eroding, that they keep their weight down, not to make this problem any worse, or not to be surprised when all of a sudden the river isn't deep anymore.
And that's certainly been an issue along the Parker.
That's right.
You know, farther downstream.
No, wait.
And no way, and we're just on the last part of the river before the falls. And I don't, you can't prohibit people from enjoying the river, that's true. But I don't know if something like jet skis is normal use of a river.
Is there currently boat traffic that you've seen up that far?
Another one of the, once in a while, they don't, not too many come up there.
Yeah.
But I was concerned when the house, this other person is also on the river, he wanted to use jet skis.
Are there docks down to the river there?
There's one dock now, close to the falls, that I can see that's on the tidal river.
Mm.
And probably the new house next to me is going to have one.
That would be really for the harbor master, I think.
Well, yeah, Harbor Master and Conservation Commission,
Yeah,
really.
but to protect, you know, the riverbank shores, especially, I mean, they should be protected, but it also happens to be my property boundary, which I wouldn't like changed.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't.
Right. Well, I could certainly refer those to the Conservation Commission and the Harbor Master to see if they
Okay.
might have some,
Well, I didn't know because of the, you know, I see all the bylaws for Plum Island and that sort of thing. And I won't keep you any longer.
no, thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you
very
much.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sitting in.
Come back anytime.
I appreciate you volunteering.
Yeah.
A little more homework.
Liaison reports.
Liaison reports. So, Board of Selectmen,
Yeah.
we were at the last meeting.
Right. So There really wasn't much, there was a bunch of business licenses and stuff, so.
Okay. Conservation,
There's
Rachel?
been a yeah, there hasn't been a meeting since the last one I attended in January, so, and I'm not gonna be there for this one, so. I think there's one the 15th, but I won't be there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm not quite sure what's on their agenda. Thanks, Ann. Good night now. Good night.
CBA.
CBA, there was a meeting Thursday evening, I was not able to be there.
I know a little bit about that.
Okay.
I think a lot of what they had on their agenda was continued.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
It was either going to be continued or had been and was not going to be picked up again for a while.
So they do have some issues that they're working on.
Okay. MVPC.
Do you want to report on
No.
that? Well, Pete was introduced at the last MVPC meeting as our alternate commissioner. There's a lot of kind of general business. I guess the big agenda item really was they kind of rolled out the regional housing plan to the commissioners who hadn't been involved in the process. And then they asked a few people to talk about success stories in their communities. Karen Conard had actually reached out to a few of us ahead of time. So ours were modest, but I did talk about changing zoning to allow the multifamily housing and the conversion of the church and the Woodbridge School, our accessory apartment bylaw, which some people were very impressed with because they actually have not been able to get that passed in their communities. So that was really kind of the highlight.
The Andover,
All right, the elderly.
it was a zoning, it would allow for limited zoning for elderly housing developments or units. So rather than, so you basically plot these down in a particular area where the need was appropriate. And it seemed like an interesting model that was working in Andover. Was there something else?
That was the most interesting one.
And what was going on in Salisbury and all of the activities that they've been
Right,
successful with.
Yeah. Lisa Pearson talked about the housing that they've been developing there.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. They,
Conversion of the old school,
right,
so it's dual use. And then the new 100, how many units is that new? Is it 100 units?
I don't remember.
But it's the new construction right off
I think 1A.
1A and it's right at
And
downtown.
near the library
Right,
there?
right by the library.
Yeah.
There's 100 new units going in next to the library.
It's set off what is the road?
That's 110.
110, but there are a number of units, because it was actually an article in the paper about it.
Right, that was the one that you sent me.
Right,
Right. I think it's actually like 82 units or
Yeah.
something like that.
yeah. It was impressive. Good cost.
Yeah, and they've been working with Habitat for Humanity. I think they've got a number of, maybe 7, something, I could be wrong on that, but a number of units that are going to be going up. And Habitat has contacted us. They're trying to identify some town-owned parcels that they might be able to acquire to, build housing on. So they've looked at 4. We kind of they met with Sam and me. We kind of narrowed it down to 2 that they were going to do some further research on.
Great.
So, which would be wonderful if that could happen.
It was a nice roundtable discussion.
Upcoming at the next planners meeting, they're actually, interestingly, somebody's going to be making a presentation on natural resource protection zoning. So I emailed Karen and told her that that was going to be very timely since we had started talking about that as a potential replacement for our OSRD. So it'll be very interesting to hear what they have to say, and I'll bring back whatever materials we get.
Is that a evening meeting? Is that open to people if it's?
I think so. We usually have a pretty good crowd, but I could certainly, if anybody's interested in attending, I could certainly ask if you could come. It would be, it's on the February 26th from noon to about 1:30. We get lunch, not pizza. So, but let me know and I can put in a request.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Any other items for discussion? Rachel?
No, I think I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
No, me.
Martha?
Nope.
All set.
All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Oh, roll call.
Roll call.
Rachel?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Larry, yes.
Yes.
Peter, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.